You're watching Pedestal by Sargeant Hagan. Chapter 23. It was 2 weeks to the day since she left, and still no word from Adriana. Gossip blogs had grown bored and moved on. Even the photos of him with smears of red lipstick had faded. Short attention span. It was a rare day. Edwin was not expected on set until evening. He decided to go out for a walk around the city. Despite his hatred of exercise, walking was always the one activity that calmed his mind and lifted his spirits. The sun was shining, but it wasn't enough to ward off the chill. Autumn was definitely making its appearance. Leaves were changing colors and the days were shorter. Although he told himself he had no particular place to go, he quickly found himself in Kensington. Might as well walk along the Broad Walk. It's always beautiful this time of year. The smaller of the trees, he noticed, had already changed to bright orange and russet, but many of the tallest ones still held on to their green hues, as if they were unable to make up their mind what season they were in. Edwin noticed quite a few mothers with children playing in the grass or making leaf piles, and the occasional dog walker stumbled by with a handful of leashes. It turned out to be a colder day than Edwin expected. He walked briskly to warm himself and soon found himself in front of the white statue of Queen Victoria. He felt like she was judging him from her exalted position, as if she disagreed with how he handled his last moments with Adriana. Can't get her out of my mind. Kensington certainly wasn't the place to forget her. He set his jaw as he approached the palace and the familiar places they had walked. There was the sunken garden. There was the cradle walk. Many of the leaves had turned yellow on the lime trees, which showed brightly against the crimson stems. When he came to it, he found he couldn't go in. He lowered his head into the cold autumn wind and walked on. Within minutes, he had arrived at the orangery. Edwin's plaid cap and wool scarf were no match for the biting chill. He decided a cup of tea would be a good idea before heading home. As he stepped through the French doors, he was instantly recognized by the Polish maitre d'. "Mr. Sterling, so happy to greet you again." He looked around and behind Edwin. "No beautiful lady friend?" he asked. "No Bruce Lee impersonator?" "Not this time," Edwin replied. Maybe this was a mistake coming here. The maitre d' showed him to a table, then paused for a moment. "I hope you don't find me impertinent," he began, "but I must tell you, I would stay away from the blonde if I were you. I've heard things." "Chloe, what kind of things?" asked Edwin, intrigued. "Well, I don't like to gossip, but my friend Christine works for the hotel where she's staying, and she says she's rude. Orders people around, even her own friends. A woman like that," he shook his head, "she's what's called high maintenance." Edwin nodded. "My thoughts exactly." The meal was uneventful. The maitre d' busied himself with other patrons, and the waiter did not seem to have been there on that fateful summer day to witness Adriana's self-defense extravaganza. He didn't ask any awkward questions. Edwin left the orangery refreshed and stood for a moment on the short flight of steps that led to the avenue of holly trees. He had stood there that day too, waiting for Adriana. The holly trees were unchanged, of course, being evergreens, except for the abundance of bright red berries that now adorned them. The squirrels were nowhere to be seen, but the birds were out in numbers, eating their way toward winter. His mind went back to that day so long ago, it seemed now. How happy he had been, touring the palace with Adriana by his side. Then the strange request to remain friends. Then the crazy fan and Adriana's remarkable ability to disarm her. Trained, she said, by watching her brother's karate class. A brilliant idea went through Edwin's mind. She has a brother. Maybe she went to visit him. Surely that is obtainable information. And what about her father? She said her mother was dead, but what if her father isn't? Hope surged through him for a moment. Then just as quickly it faded. Why do I even care? I must train myself not to care. He began the walk through the holly avenue. He was lost in his own thoughts and didn't see or hear the group of young women who laughingly poured out of Kensington Palace as he passed. "Edwin!" He looked up at the sound of his own name. It was Chloe. Their eyes met. Edwin braced himself for the onslaught of her wrath. After a few meager texts, he had stopped contacting her altogether. She had left a few voicemails afterwards. The last one was tearful, asking him if he even cared for her at all. He didn't, so he hadn't called back. Now here she was at Kensington, probably doing one of her historical tours to get inspiration for her album. After a few brief seconds of hesitation, she nearly ran to him, a huge smile engulfing her face. She embraced him, giving him a peck on each cheek. Edwin was so surprised he forgot to cringe. She was wearing a bright red cape with a hood that matched the stain of her lips. She looked like Little Red Riding Hood, or the wolf in disguise. "Edwin, you naughty boy," she teased. "I haven't seen you in all this time. I'm nearly finished with my album." She playfully slapped him on the chest. Then she reached up and rubbed the lipstick marks off his cheeks. "Wouldn't want a repeat of those naughty photographs," she teased. Her friends tittered. Edwin recognized Marianne and Shelley from the hoi polloi. They had another friend with them with a camera. Her job was clearly to document Chloe's time in London. She took several snaps of the two of them together, including one of Chloe rubbing the lipstick off his cheek. Irritating. She's definitely going to milk this. "What are you doing here? We were touring the palace. It's so awesome and so historical." Now Edwin did cringe. "I was out for a walk," he explained. "You know," she said, taking his arm, "I was just thinking I'd like to take a walk today." There was a chorus of giggles from her retinue. "I'll join you," she said, as if giving him a present. The last thing Edwin wanted was to take a walk with Chloe, but he felt guilty for using her to get back at Adriana, and her surprising goodwill toward him caught him off guard. What would David advise? No scenes in public. "My friends were just going back to the hotel, weren't you girls? I know you all need to rest." There was disappointed agreement from the group. The girl with the camera hesitated. "Shoo," said Chloe, waving her on. The ladies quickly took their leave and headed across the park. Two dark-suited men with earpieces stayed, however, and followed a few paces behind Chloe. Edwin hadn't noticed them before. Bodyguards, I guess. Edwin wondered if the bodyguards were necessary or an accessory, like the bracelets spiraling down her arm. Chloe chattered away. The album was going well, according to her, and her record label was excited about its future release. Edwin found it easy to contemplate his own thoughts because she only needed a nod here and there or an assentive, that's amazing. Thoughts of the last visit to Kensington caused him to think of Mr. Tastan. He envisioned him relaxing in his cushy flat, feeling safe, oblivious to the fact that someone wanted to blow him up. A second attempt on his life in just a few days. Who wanted him dead and why? And the question that Edwin thought was most intriguing, why had they failed twice? He led Chloe down the broad walk towards Kensington Road. It couldn't be said that the two celebrities did not attract attention as they strolled under the brightly colored trees. The red cape and hood alone was enough to turn heads, but the bodyguards dissuaded any autograph seekers. At last they were in front of the building he had been looking for. It was a Georgian, painted white, with black iron lettering that read, "The Swan." Each flat was really one of a series of row houses, each with its own door. There was a brass plaque on one of the doors that announced it was the office. "I need to go in here for a minute," he said to Chloe. "Oh." She stopped her flow of chattering long enough to look around her. "Where are we?" she asked, frowning. Edwin pushed open the door and stopped. Someone was sitting in a chair talking with a woman who appeared to be the office manager. Edwin recognized the back of the head immediately.